Stevens was arrested at a Torres scrap metal plant in January and charged over the death of 30-year-old Wollongong man Alex Van Olden. Van Olden was crushed to death against a wall in the car park of the Palais Royal nightclub in Hunter Street. He'd noticed a person driving his car and was hanging on to the driver's side door. Facing court today, Stevens told Van Olden's family he was very sorry for what had happened. But outside the court, Alex Van Olden's father, Peter, said he was still bitter.
I feel very bitter towards the young bloke, not to his parents. Because I'm a parent myself, I know what. 6 children, I did have. And, you know, this lad's taken one of mine, and that's why I feel so bitter.
The court was told Stevens was heavily influenced by alcohol at the time of the incident and was pleading guilty to manslaughter. He'll be sentenced on Friday. Matthew White, NBN News.
Alternative therapist Hans Butenhaus was practising at this Raymond Terrace clinic until about 3 months ago. He was masquerading as a doctor, offering false hope and herbal medicine to a long line of desperate cancer sufferers. In May, former patient Una Piri told NBN that Butenhaus claimed he had cured her cancer.
And I asked him, how did he know I was free of cancer? And he said he could tell by my eyes. And that was all.
But that was not all. Una is dying. Her interviews sparked an investigation by the Medical Complaints Unit.
Look, the Act prevents me from discussing it while it's under investigation, but it's proceeding.
What most patients don't realise is that the Medical Complaints Unit can only take action within 6 months of treatment. For Una and a number of other families, it's now too late. The state government wants to change the laws regarding unqualified people who offer cancer cures. Health Minister Ron Phillips has introduced 2 bills into Parliament which are designed to protect the public from quacks. Under the new medical practice bill, people have been given 2 years to take legal action. While the legislation won't be retrospective, the Health Department says it's a step in the right direction.
So what the new Medical Practice Act says, we've got 2 years to deal with it. So that allows time for families to grieve if in fact there's a death of a family member as a result of the treatment, and it also gives us time to do a proper investigation and look at more of the public interest issues.
The new legislation won't help Una Piri and other families' individual cases. However, boss of the Complaints Unit, Marilyn Walton, says they've helped change the law, making it easier to prosecute anyone who offers cancer patients false hope in the future. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
With a history stretching back almost 5 decades, the Rutherford National Textiles Mill has for the past year been facing an uncertain future. The mill, which was owned by the Sarah Lee Group, had been on the market, and on the line were 450 jobs.
If certain other competitors within the industry had been successful in obtaining control, then there's no doubt that under rationalisation, which is, when all said and done, one of the planks of the government policy, under rationalisation this plant would have been closed.
But these men, women and machines producing 20 million square metres of fabric each year will continue to provide the cloth we wear. A consortium of the mill's managers has bought the operation for an undisclosed amount and intends to keep the plant profitable without cutting the workforce. And that's welcome news to the employees and the shopkeepers of Maitland.
The best thing happened in my 40 years of working in the area.
Every week I expected to get my notice handed to me, and there was a few things that I would have liked to have bought over previous time, but I couldn't because, you know, like I said, you never know if you're going to lose your job or not.
So what's running through your mind now?
Relief.
While the workers here are more secure about their jobs, management warns there's still one obstacle to a certain future for Australia's textile industry, and that's the federal government and opposition's plans to eliminate tariffs. That move, Brian Smith says, could decimate the entire industry and cost the jobs of 70,000 people.
The reduction of tariffs, the regime that is planned, that things will get harder and harder to manufacture in this country.
But Mr Smith says the management team is confident that given a change in government policy, the Rutherford Mill will be helping us to dress well into the future. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
She stepped off the plane this morning after 3 days in the air. It's been a hectic tour, the United States, Barcelona, France, all that after being injured in April. But she had one more stop to make this afternoon. Rachel had to pick up a little something she bought herself. The McQuillans lobbed into a local car yard. Rachel's bleary eyes widened and she shrugged off her shroud of fatigue. Behold, her two-door toy.
I didn't get any sleep on the plane because I was thinking about the car the whole time, so when I finally arrived I was pretty tired after a long trip, so I think I'll drive it around for a couple of hours and I'll go to bed, I think, tonight, exhausted.
Flowers, followed by some quick instructions. Then for Newcastle's top tennis player, one more circuit. Of the car yard, that is.
While 144 miners at the Wallara Colliery at Catherine Hill Bay have been given their retrenchment notices, their union is not giving their jobs up for lost yet. Union delegates from all of Coal and Allied's operations throughout the Hunter met this afternoon and resolved to fight the sackings.
Recommendation to the rank and file to mandate the merger executive to initiate an industrial media campaign in an endeavour to have the Coal and Allied management accept responsible negotiations on the future of its workforce at the Wallara complex.
The industrial campaign the union intends to pursue will be directed only at Coal and Allied, for what the Federation believes was a lack of consultation on the company's part.
We haven't set any parameters on the industrial campaign, so we're not excluding any areas of industrial action that could be deemed appropriate by the rank and file during the course of it.
The union has also called on Natural Resources Minister Ian Causley to intervene to try and reverse the retrenchments.
The Department of Minerals at the present time are organising meetings so that the employers and the unions can sit down and we can have a look at the reasons for the necessity for the people being put off at the present time.
While the Mine Workers Federation fights on, the men who received their notices last week after Coal and Allied said it had to rein in costs admit they're in despair.
Our chances of gaining employment in the industry for the fellows that have been retrenched is very minimal.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Got your audio up? Yep. There you go for a tour.
This afternoon, police and fire crews were going over the boat trying to determine what happened. It's believed Brian Long of McMaster's Beach was trying to repair the starter motor on the 9-metre fiberglass cruiser when the boat burst into flames on the Broadwater Channel. It's thought petrol from the boat's motor ignited, engulfing the craft within seconds. Mr. Long jumped into the water, but not before suffering serious burns. He was taken to Gosford Hospital. And in Lake Macquarie today, a fire hazard at Terralba. Around 5 hectares of land near Racecourse Road caught fire at around 12:30. The land is used as a type of rubbish tip. Thick smoke from the blaze was whipped onto nearby Lake Road. It was closed for an hour. By 4:30 this afternoon, brigades had the fire under control.
Investing a lot faster than we are, and their return on human capital and their value up to 100, 200 Ks at a program. Typically one company might set up a remote part of the Korean through the program, and people would go to Korea under the intervening period. And I believe there must be a lot of people out there worldwide who might catch the people who come into this program. And one last one is, I was recently at the University of Alberta, where days for about 10 hours a day. And I learned more about myself and the people I was in this group with than I did about my own family, I think, over my lifetime.
In gusty conditions, the semi-finals of the men's singles were fought out between the Still Cities and Sydney. In the first semi, Dapto's John Hopper battled hard before succumbing to St Ives bowler Peter Hawes 31-25. Hawes will now meet fellow Sydney sider Brian Elderton in the final. Elderton from the St Mary's Club was up against Charlestown's Ian Barrett. Barrett had won a swag of titles in Newcastle this year, but couldn't add a state crown as Elderton won easily 31-19.
The rear bogie of a fuel wagon being pulled by a special ballast cleaning train jumped the line about 200 metres before the crossing. The errant wheels chopping up sleepers and damaging trackside signalling equipment as they were dragged along. The train eventually stopped, neatly blocking the road crossing, creating a headache for motorists and for police trying to keep traffic away from the gates. And to prove it never rains but it pours, The jolting punctured a drum of hydraulic oil, which meant the fire brigade had to be called in to clean up the mess. The only good news was that the derailment was on a siding and does not affect the main line. Jim Sullivan, NBN News.
Australia's beaches are often taken for granted as playgrounds, but more frequently the lines are drawn between developers, environmentalists, local and state governments to turn them into battlegrounds. Issues such as pollution, sewage disposal, flora and fauna degradation aren't easily washed away, opposing undercurrents never far from the surface.
No management solutions have been found to many of these problems. The governments are quite concerned that they haven't yet found the best ways to deal with these issues. And in the process there are government departments, various other organisations including local authorities all trying to achieve some unclear objectives in an overlapping fashion.
The first phase of a resource assessment commission is now in action. For 2 months, commissioners are travelling through coastal communities around Australia, hearing submissions from interested groups. Local councils have called for the federal government to establish a coastal authority. Community groups on the north coast want building bans and coastal buffer zones, while others on the central coast hope to see the establishment of extensive marine sanctuaries.
Consideration is being given to the idea of having more marine parks around the country. Just what sort of parks they'd be, what could go on inside them and so on are fairly contentious matters.
The inquiry's draft report will be made to the Prime Minister and released by December. It's to be followed by a conciliatory round of hearings before a strategy is drawn up. The coastal zone will remain under the bombardment of conflicting interests for at least another year. The findings of the inquiry won't be published until November 1993. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News. The bright orange superstructure of the Eva Burrows came into sight off Newcastle this afternoon as it headed for a welcome by the MSB Hunter Port Authority. The 24-metre vessel, named after a Newcastle-born community worker who went on to be a world leader in the Salvation Army, is the sister ship of 2 other such tugs launched at Carrington Slipways in 1987. The Eva Burrows has been stationed at Botany Bay and is especially equipped to fight fires and oil spills, disasters of the magnitude of a grounded bulk carrier, or the fire on board the Hong Kong-registered Falcon Arrow in 1984. At the height of that blaze, all available services poured 1,000 litres of water a minute into the flames. The Eva Burrows entered port today in a veil of spray, her main fire monitor producing 10,000 litres of water a minute, or 60,000 litres of firefighting foam. 2 side jets can spray another 18,000 litres each. Apart from her emergency response capability, the Eva Burrows could prove a big hit at harbour celebrations. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News.
Mining in Australia is a multi-billion-dollar industry that accounts for half our exports. The nuts and bolts and high technology that help extract the valuable products from the earth are being highlighted in the Mine and Quarry 92 display. With 200 exhibitors showing off virtually everything that bangs, lifts and twists in the mining industry, the organisers thought Singleton was the ideal venue for the display.
Singleton's ideally located in the heartland of mining in New South Wales. There's an enormous mining community within a very short distance of Singleton.
And the business brought to town by the exhibition has been embraced by Singleton Shire Council.
They've been here setting it up for 2 weeks. We've got accommodation benefits, we've got our restaurants and our tourist facilities.
While a Western Australian firm displayed the latest in rescue techniques for injured workers, the Mining Industry Council's Lachlan McIntosh told an audience mines are doing some rescuing of their own for the national economy.
The jobs we need for ourselves, the jobs we need for our children will only exist if we continue to grow, continue to find new opportunities, continue to invest, continue to develop new equipment, new techniques,
and successfully sell our products at internationally competitive prices.
Despite the recession, the exhibition's organisers expect millions of dollars in equipment to change hands over the next 2 days. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
The story so far. Students at Newcastle University have been lobbying for a railway station since 1964. At the start of this year, the federal government allocated $2.5 million for the building of a station at Warrabrook. But that money didn't allow for roads and pathways to the campus, so the whole project ground to a halt. And the students lay the blame squarely at the feet of
bureaucrats. Basically bureaucrats everywhere. Admin at the university, state rail, the government, state and federal. They're all got a hand in it, and we're getting sick of it.
Another $600,000 is needed for infrastructure. The students have released this report in an effort to coax the money from the federal coffers. In it, 51% say transport to the uni is a problem. 92% say that if a railway station is established, they will choose accommodation to take advantage of it. At the moment, accommodation and car parking are the chronic problems.
People from Maitland have to move to Newcastle to go to the university, so we argue that if we have a train station there on that line, the people from Maitland can still live in Maitland.
Politicians and State Rail will soon receive copies of the study. The university administration is yet to comment on the document. Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
Smoke billowing into the sky over Maitland at noon spelt trouble to emergency units as they rushed to the Tiger Oil depot in the Rutherford Industrial Estate. What they and onlookers found was an inferno.
Just heard this explosion and we went out the back there and there was just a big huge fireball next door at Tiger Oil. Flames were shooting 30-40 feet in the air and there was just drums of oil going off everywhere.
The explosions have been a number of 200-litre avgas drums, which have probably, from that initial explosion, have involved the other tanks.
50 44-gallon drums filled with oil added more fuel to the fire. For 30 minutes the blaze raged out of control, with officers' fears growing that 2 large tanks containing diesel could go up. But the quick arrival of a foam unit from Newcastle, along with 4 other brigades attending, extinguished the flames and possible disaster.
If it had involved both those dieseline tanks, we would have had a fairly major fire here.
Police estimate the damage bill is about $30,000. Fire investigation and police scientific squad members are looking into the blaze, but at this stage it's believed a stray welding spark set the oil alight. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Supply squadrons are the nuts and bolts operations that keep the Air Force flying. In a Defence Force rationalisation program, the 502 Support Squadron, now based in Melbourne, will be shifted to Williamtown. The move will swell the base's population of 2,000, which already injects $70 million a year into the local economy.
There'll be an extra 100 people in the area, which will mean a wage bill of between $4 and $5 million, most of which will go directly into the local community.
In addition to existing support squadron facilities, a $1.4 million building will be constructed to house 30 to 40,000 new lines of equipment, everything from rivets to jet engines, light bulbs and uniforms. The move will also bring to the base the extensive inventory of more than 60,000 spare parts needed to keep the expensive F-18 Hornets flying.
The Hornets cost around about $60,000 all up an hour to operate, and by having them here at Williamtown there will be savings.
As part of the rationalisation, RAF Williamtown has today taken 2,200 Hunter-based Army personnel under its wing and is now responsible for wages and housing. The Navy is in port as well, bringing 2 of its heavy landing craft in for refits at the Four Jacks dock. The Brunei and Batano will be in Newcastle for 2 weeks. The Brunei and the Batano could be the first in a long list of Navy contracts to be awarded to the Four Jacks dock. Despite a strike that deadlocked work on the HMAS Tobruk, it's now believed that 2.5 years of hard work and more than $1 million invested by Four Jacks could land it a Navy Quality Assurance Certificate. Such accreditation would strengthen Four Jacks' competitive bidding for future contracts. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News.
The emphasis this year is on free entertainment wherever possible, so once through the gate, the hip pocket nerve can stop twitching for a while. There were free frills under the big top, Perry Brothers Circus providing some eye-boggling chiropractic capers. Outside, Sideshow Alley was in full cry. The amplified beat struck a chord with the kids. Imaginations were on fire. Alone, Casey Jones, knee-high Harley riders, and baby Biggles. But overhead, something was brewing.
I'm not looking.
You're just covering your eyes?
Yes.
In the ring, the traditional show events were underway, but today's main event, the Grand Parade, was yet to come, and something else was on its way. When it arrived, the parade snaked around the showground, trailing a bizarre array of showgirls, community groups, and costumed characters. From gnome-high nags to pink leopard lookalikes all received a rousing reception. And then, right on cue,
Urban sprawl is Sydney's nightmare, and with Australia's largest city expected to grow by almost another 1 million people in the next 20 years, the state government has been reviewing its metropolitan strategy, looking at relieving Sydney's already swollen boundaries. The relief, according to the government, could be provided by directing the growth to the Hunter and the Illawarra.
Our feeling at this stage is that numbers in the order of perhaps 150,000 people additional to the Hunter on top of normal growth is the sort of figure we'd be looking for.
Yet not everyone is welcoming the idea of such a large population growth in the Hunter.
We've really got to get away from the state government's attitude to the Hunter as a kind of dumping ground for the problems of Sydney, and we have to look at what really is a sustainable level of population for this region.
As part of the strategy's review, the Hunter is preparing a submission to estimate what effects a larger population would have on public facilities, employment and the environment. If large numbers of people do move to the Hunter, there's concern the quality of life that this region currently offers will be lost and the worst elements of big city living will take over.
I mean, we are a regional community rather than a large city community, and I think that's worth preserving.
I think that is a concern in a lot of people's minds, including HEDCs, and given that we're trying to do this over a 20-year time frame, I'm confident that those sorts of issues can be addressed in such a way that we don't simply create another Sydney here in the Hunter.
This region's submission will be sent to the Department of Planning at the end of the month. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
A torrential downpour made conditions difficult in the first half, but that didn't seem to bother Meredith and Spink as they made Bozinchik work overtime. West Adelaide swung into action, with Rickoy finding Calorita streaking down the left wing, and this time it was Gibson who was brought into action. The visitors poured on the pressure, and Brazzali's volley was a beauty. And that was followed by Caloritas' cross nearly flicked on by an alert Greg Brown. Again the NSL League leaders went forward, Brazzali brilliant, and only a deflection protected the 0-0 scoreline. And just before the break, Mike Gibson made another crucial save. A scoreless first half with West Adelaide holding the balance of power, But then the BHP breakers took over. Cosker's great vision finding Roberts all alone, but he pushed it wide. Then enter Warren Spink as he gained confidence on his suspect groin with a super turn and shot with his left foot. The breakers went right on the attack. Brown's header couldn't break the deadlock. But in the 55th minute, Socceroo striker Warren Spink brought the crowd to its feet. West Adelaide then pushed forward, and in the 77th minute, Brown chipped back across the front of goal, and Iriarty was on the spot to level the scores. Neither side created any more real chances, and the final scoreline read, BHP Breakers 1, West Adelaide 1. Interested onlookers included defending classic champion Thomas Leash of Germany, who cast a quizzing eye over the local talent of the Coffs Harbour Cycle Club as they raced through their own streets in a prelude to the start of the big race. The 1 kilometre course provided the opportunity for the competitors to feel the euphoria created in Coffs by the international field assembled for the classic, and they went about their task with real gusto. All cyclists had to race over a 20-minute period, plus complete an additional 2 laps, and they did that averaging 42 kilometres per hour. In a close finish, it was Matthew Backhouse who got the nod from Mark Batty, Darren Sheridan and Darren Johns.
The state-of-the-art bushfire tankers were assembled by Gosford Council mechanics at a saving of $45,000 to the city. The units have been allocated to Narara, Pearl Beach and Kilcare. It's a start on updating the firefighting fleet on the Central Coast, which has been gradually run down over the past 20 years. Mayor Robert Bell said the saving on the new tankers would go towards defraying the cost of the next 3 units. The Mayor praised the Erina Workshop staff on its accomplishment and presented a certificate to the engineer in charge. Alderman Bell said the council would continue to renew the bushfighting vehicles till the fleet of 15 had been replaced. The new tenders will lead the Central Coast fight against any bushfire alert in the coming hot months.
It may not have been George Street in Sydney, but the warmth and pride shown for local lass, Australian Paralympian swimming captain Sarah Jane Schulze, was amazing. It seemed the whole of Narrabri and the surrounding shire was in Maitland Street for a ticker tape parade of their own. Sarah Jane captained the Olympic team in Madrid and returned home via England with a silver and 2 bronze medals for the relays. Sarah Jane also finished with 3/4 and 2/5 to go with her medals, making it to all the finals of every event she contested. She enjoyed every moment of the parade, waving to a parochial hometown crowd, something Sarah Jane will cherish for the rest of her life.
I'd like to thank the people of Narrabri for their support for the Australian Paralympic team, and I did my best for Australia. Thank you very much.
The quest for medals wasn't an easy one, with constant trips to Moree for training, but all the hard work paid handsome dividends.
And it's hard in a country town where you don't have facilities and you're going into the Northern Hemisphere to compete at the end of our winter. It just does make it hard. It puts a tremendous load on everyone. But it was the support that we got not only from Narrabri but the whole region, I think, that really made it so worthwhile.
Once considered a polluted ugly duckling, Throsby Creek and its foreshores are on the drawing board to be turned into a picture of beauty for Newcastle. Now the dredging of the stretch of creek from Hannell Street to Islington Park is complete, a community meeting today discussed ideas for improving the foreshore.
It's not much use having a nice waterway unless it's a usable waterway. And so it'll provide for recreation on the land.
About 60 people attended to comment on the $25,000 foreshore study financed by the Hunter Catchment Management Trust. Once the study is complete, it'll be handed to authorities such as Newcastle City Council to bring the plans to life.
There's really no other city, an old city if you like, which has got an opportunity to have a beautiful inner city waterway like this.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.